Welcome back to the Recharge Zone podcast. I'm your host, Brent Doty, joined with my co-host, Ann-Margaret Gonzalez. Hi, Ann-Margaret.
Hi.
And today we have a special guest. This guest is the longest tenured active employee at the EAA. He is approaching retirement, and we wanted to get him here on the podcast to ask him all about his career, changes he's seen at the EAA, and many other things. This is Brock Curry. Brock, welcome to the Recharge Zone podcast.
Thanks so much. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
All right, Brock, question one. We want to talk about how you first came to be at the EAA.
Well, that's an interesting story, I think. I went to the LBJ School of Public Affairs at UT and got my degree in public administration, master's of public administration. And I'd gone to work for the city of Austin in the budget office with a plan to become a city manager. After about 5 years in the budget office, which is back then was like 35 dog years in terms of the workload and crazy budget size seasons. But having worked closely with city managers in that time, I kind of began sinking in that I didn't really want to be a city manager. I didn't really care for the way they are at the whim of city council members and city councils and were itinerant, essentially moving all over, and that was kind of not appealing to me. So I wanted to do something that combined my interest and skills with respect to administration, budgeting, but I wanted to broaden that experience. And my interest in environmental issues.
Nice.
And so I saw the posting for a division manager for administration at the new Edwards Aquifer Authority. And I was living in Austin at the time, obviously, and came down here and interviewed. And the interviews went really well, and ended up taking the job. A funny story was when at the time we had a young 2-year-old, and my wife was pregnant with our second child. And when I came back after I felt successful interviews, and I was really kind of excited, my wife says, "You're not thinking about taking that job, are you?" And I said, "Well, hadn't been offered, but yeah." But I took the job, and we moved a few months later to San Antonio. But that line, "You're not thinking about taking that job," became a recurring theme for us for a while, because we loved Austin and had just really missed Austin for a while. And every time we'd go back to visit and we'd do something fun or see friends or whatever, Betty would look at me and say, "You're not thinking about taking that job," recounting the original time. Yeah. But over time, San Antonio is the place we want to be. And those comments never come up anymore. But I made that commute from Austin for 2 months. And I know people here more recently have done it for a lot longer, but man, that about killed me.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know how they do it, especially now.
Yeah.
And with two little ones, my gosh.
Yeah. So I started on a Friday for some weird reason. And Sam, who we thought was due in November, was actually born the 12th, the next day.
No way.
So
wow.
So that was, I tell the story that, people that worked for me, my new staff here, didn't know what to think, because I started on Friday and I didn't come back for like 2 weeks, because I'd already talked about, needing to take some time off whenever the baby did come, and he came a lot earlier than we thought.
And when you did come back, you were super tired.
That's right. That's right.
Perfect timing, perfect timing. So Brock, what are some highlights of your career, whether it be moments of recognition or just good-hearted, feel-good moments? We want to hear them.
Yeah, I failed to mention that in addition to the longest active employee, Brock is also our deputy general manager.
Yeah.
So he's been around the block here at EAA in a bunch
Yes.
of different positions, and we want to hear about that.
Okay.
You've worn many hats in your career.
Yeah.
Can you give us some highlights, some maybe lowlights or
Yeah.
things, or things that you kind of had to weather the storm, but then you saw it out and you saw the sunset on the horizon.
You were here just after the EAA became officially
Right.
an agency, essentially in 1996. And at that time, there was a lot of turmoil. We were talking before the podcast started. That was the period of the initial permitting of the aquifer, cutting the available water into pieces of pie and handing that out. And that must have been quite a time to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was, the EAA came into existence June 28th of 1996, which was, I think, a Friday. So I think the first day of operations was July 1st, and I started on October 11th of 96. And as we were talking about, I think I may have been the first person hired at the EAA. I could be wrong on
That's
that.
incredible.
But
I think you are.
very, very, one of the very first. And so, my tenure is the same as the authority itself. But, I was not directly involved in the permitting aspect of the organization, but we were already up to our eyeballs in getting the permitting process going. I remember the permits applications were actually due on December 30th of 96. And so that process had already started and then began in earnest in January of 97 is when folks started sorting through those applications and figuring out, like you said, who was going to get how much water under their permit. Our accounting person, and back in those days, there was only basically one person wearing a hat. So there was one HR person, there was one accounting person, there was one
scientist.
Yeah, there were more, I guess, people in the field, but still not like we have today.
Yeah.
But I remember when we were sending out the paperwork for permit applications, the only database that we had for people in the area was managed through our accounting system.
Wow.
So anytime we did a mail out, our accountant had to be the one to generate the
mail list, right?
The mail list.
Yeah.
And that was just bizarre, particularly in hindsight. It's like, wow.
It basically shows you the need, right?
Right.
The need for having people with that mindset of accounting and like keeping track of everything.
Right. And it had nothing to do with her job, but there was as the permits got issued, ultimately there was a link between those permits and the fees that were being charged.
When that I guess permitting was being structured and everything was happening, were people skeptical of the EAA because they knew the EAA was coming?
Oh yeah.
But like once the EAA kind of got going and then this permitting system was put in place and they were going to be charged for the water that they were going to use, can you kind of explain their feelings about the EAA at that point and maybe how they've evolved over the years?
Yeah. When I was hired to, like I mentioned, to do that, the joke amongst some of the staff was, and what they told me after the fact, that they were having these conversations that we're going to get the new guy, meaning me, to be the one to go out and conduct public hearings to inform the new permit holders that they were going to need to start paying for their water. And I have I have a vivid memory of public hearings particularly in the western part, Medina County, Uvalde County, mostly irrigators, where we were introducing new rules and informing them of how we were going to be assessing aquifer management fees. And the anger from so many people,
Right.
Because not only were they going to be limited in how much they could pump, because they had not been limited before, not only were they going to be limited in how much they could pump, but they were going to have to pay the EAA for that right to pump.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was some irate folks, but over time, and I dealt with phone calls. Again, we were still pretty small shop. We had one person in the accounting area, and she was getting phone calls from irate people.
Yeah.
And over time, she got better at dealing with those, but sometimes I would get involved in those conversations. And what I found was, for most people, if you presented basically a face to an otherwise faceless organization, a voice, and you talked to them as a fellow human being, and gave them, just a simple, matter-of-fact explanation of what was going on, 9 times out of 10, the people calmed down.
Mm-hmm.
They still probably didn't agree, but at least they knew they were dealing with people.
Yeah.
And, one of the things we used to say is the nice thing about the EAA is our staff comes from the community that we're regulating.
Yes.
And we felt that was really important, even though, I'm not a permit holder per se, but, and didn't know the first thing about farming, for instance, or operating a utility or anything like that. But at least I lived in the community. And in the time, people got comfortable with it. Then, once the permits got issued in full, which took some time for a number of reasons, but once those permits ultimately got issued and people realized that there was money to be made in selling or leasing water that someone didn't really need, people got a lot happier.
Yeah, I'm sure, right?
And not only that, I think they now recognize that, putting a cap on the amount of water that can be withdrawn preserves the resource.
Right.
And if that wasn't there, their permit, their water would be in jeopardy anyway.
Right.
And at least now they have some legal recourse or some protection.
And I mean, this was all happening at the same time that catfish farm situation had kind of transpired, right? So they knew that if you didn't put some kind of permit on and a cap on the water, that eventually or something like that could happen again, right?
Right. And I think the catfish farm matter was kind of the impetus behind the Edwards Aquifer Authority Act being adopted. And so they saw what could happen.
Right. Yeah. That puts it in perspective.
Our listeners, just so you're familiar, this incident had dealt with a high-capacity artesian well, so a single well producing the equivalent of about a quarter of San Antonio. So a single well producing a lot of water, and there was no legal course to stop it until the EAA began operations, and there was a cap put on the aquifer. So folks they understood that at least, that if we didn't do this, that we might eventually have water supply issues with the aquifer.
Right.
So Brock, speaking of, then and now, and things have changed. You mentioned that there was one person to do this and one person to do that. So we went from a staff of less than 30 to nearly 100 now. Here we are in 2022. And that came about because there were needs that needed addressed, such as habitat conservation, needing additional science to understand our regulations, needing extra meter folks to look at the meters. So, you talk to us about the growth of the agency over time, and anything else you want to talk about like that.
Yeah, another interesting thing I think when I started, not only was there essentially one person per job, not everyone had computers on their desk.
That is, I can't even imagine that.
No.
And when we first decided we needed to get personal computers on people's desks, the IT person or persons, I think there may have been two at that point, they built the computers that were the initial ones to go out to the employees.
Oh, really?
And they were great.
Yeah.
I mean, for that technology in 1997,
Yeah,
98,
yeah.
they were great. But now, we buy them off the shelf,
Yeah.
from whoever.
Wow.
So that was kind of an interesting thing. But it's staff growth has always been a concern about both internally, but probably more externally about, people concerned that we were burgeoning bureaucracy that was going to grow and grow and grow just for growth's sake. And some could still argue that, but I would argue that, to your point, Brent, that it's the growth has been according to the need and the needs of our science work, the needs of the administrative support that needs to go along with a growing organization, growing in terms of staff, but also responsibilities. And we're still small by groundwater conservation district standards. We are gigantic compared to most in the state that are 1 or 2 person shops. So we're unique in that area. So, but on the big scale things, we're not a big organization.
No.
But we have gotten to a size, I think, that it's harder to get people together. Even if we have a big, event, people are out. There's going to be people out just because of time off or family needs or whatever.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's kind of been a interesting ride to see how we've progressed.
Brock, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about some advice to other career professionals. You've been at one agency for 26 plus years. That in itself is a testament to your work ethic. I wonder if you might share some advice for folks here at EAA or other career professionals at similar agencies. Anything you'd like to share about that?
There's a lot to possibly delve into with that. I'll try to keep it minimal. But, my experience, I came from a liberal arts college and kind of a liberal arts master's degree program. So I have I know a little bit about a lot. And which is somewhat unique in a agency like the EAA, because you have a lot of people that are very focused either on the science side or, as we've grown, to very specific understanding of human resources or accounting or IT. So my approach has been broader because I know enough about computers to be dangerous. I know enough about accounting to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And you name it, I'm just dangerous. But
Dangerous is middle name.
yeah. And so I come from a different perspective of trying to look at the big picture. And one thing that I've tried to instill in myself, but also in employees that I work closely with, is to get an understanding of the entire organization, to understand why what you do is important, but even more important is how that fits into the big picture. What does it matter if I'm doing this job function that no one sees or no one understands, but doing it with pride and with integrity, and doing it well, ultimately supports the entire organization. And so, yeah, there's always going to be positions that it may have maybe more critical than others, but everyone has a role to play. And I have found it meaningful personally that, a lot of this, again, coming from the administrative side, a lot of the work I've done has been kind of behind the scenes, at least early on. And for me, that was important to know, yeah, it's kind of behind the scenes, but it's really supporting the bigger program, the bigger initiative. And so I would just argue that, from an employee, just regardless of what your role is at the EAA, or what your career aspirations are, just always do the best job you can and be honest with yourself, with your coworkers, with your supervisor, and don't be afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
And
I like it.
Yeah. It makes me think of, the data collection. This is kind of what came to mind when you were saying that, is the data collections that you all have done over the years in aquifer science. Like, those people are going out in the field, or they were, and now some of it's telemetry based, and, it transmits it back to the EA. But before, they were going and doing those manual readings, and probably doing it every few days or every day, and just kind of churning away and just what is this going to be used for? Who's looking at this? But then, fast forward to now, there's this whole full-fledged data collection site. You have someone managing it, you have people looking at it, analyzing it, you have the field research park. So it just shows the full evolution of the things that people have done from the very beginning and planted that seed, and what the EA has grown. I mean, you were a part of that from the very beginning.
mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, to Brock's point, I might use data that somebody collected 10 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe they wouldn't have known that I would need it.
Yeah.
But they need to look at the bigger picture, or why do we have a habitat conservation team, and what I do does support that.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. That's a really good advice.
When the the Habitat Conservation Program came into existence 2000, predating the current HCP, there was the Edwards Aquifer Recovery Implementation Program
Mm-hmm.
that was established by the legislature in 2007, and that led to the creation and ultimate approval by the Fish and Wildlife Service of a habitat conservation plan. What I understand is that that plan has been successful, or was successful in getting created and adopted because of the work that the EAA had done in years past.
Mm-hmm.
Not only staff, but also contractors. But we had such a good baseline of information going into that, the current HCP process, that it was just that, people that were back in early 2000s
Yeah.
may have been collecting information and not knowing
Yeah.
what it was going to be used
True.
for. And
Yeah.
it's really been a benefit to us and the region with the HCP.
Absolutely.
So Brock, I have a kind of a fun question. So I was going to say a different number of years, but since it's 26 years, correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is some advice you would tell 26-year-old Brock?
Stay in Austin, or
Yeah, I'm not thinking about taking that job. Let's see. So I'm trying to do the math. So I was 33 when I started.
Uh-huh.
So 26-year-old was just starting my career,
Yeah.
basically. I think for me, it was don't get too comfortable with what you're doing, because you're going to do something that you never dreamed of.
Uh-huh. I like that.
And don't get too comfortable, but also don't worry about what the next step is.
Yes.
You have to have a little bit of be a little fearless.
Yeah.
I guess with change, because like I said, my original thought was I was going to go into city management field, and taking the step to the EAA. I never thought I'd be at the EAA for as long as I've been.
Yeah.
I never dreamed I would retire from here.
Uh-huh.
But just having confidence and trust that, not all your decisions are going to work out,
Absolutely.
but, they're going to work out in some way.
Yes.
And, for me, it's turned out great.
Yeah.
And, couldn't imagine myself anywhere else.
Yeah.
That's great.
That is.
And I have another fun question for you. What are you looking forward to in retirement? What kinds of things do you want to spend more time on?
Ultimately, just enjoying life and enjoying whatever comes my way. I was talking to Ann-Margaret a couple of weeks ago, and it dawned on me that my interests, hobbies, if you will, revolve around spinning wheels. And as Brent knows, because he and I have ridden together, bicycling is one of my hobbies. Started with road biking, not doing as much of that now. Frankly, I haven't done anything lately, but doing more mountain biking, and then gravel biking is kind of a new thing that I've taken on, which is kind of a mashup of those two, where you get to go a little faster on flatter roads usually, but on gravel where there's no traffic. So I like those types of spinning wheels.
Yeah.
And I've also, during the pandemic, I purchased a pottery wheel.
Oh, neat.
Because since college, where I took two classes actually in pottery, I've kind of dabbled over the years, taking continuing education classes.
That's fun.
Here and there, but nothing consistent enough to be any good. Enough to know that I realized that I do have some abilities there, but I need to practice.
Yeah.
And even though I have a wheel, I still haven't really practiced, but I do enjoy that spinning wheel as well.
That's awesome.
I like that.
And so, those are the two main things. I've got a long list of projects that I need to tackle on our house.
Mm-hmm.
In 2006, we bought an old 1920s era house that needed a lot of work, and it's in a lot better shape, but there's always a project. And so still have some, and we've done a lot of the work ourselves, for better or for worse. But I've got some projects to keep me busy for a while too.
Maybe we'll see some collections of mugs from you, or some ceramic type things that we can purchase.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how. We'll see. I've had several conversations with family and friends about what that's going to look like. Is it going to be a studio where I'm selling stuff?
That'd be fun.
But yeah, I don't know.
The possibilities, right?
Yeah.
You can do whatever you want now.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Brock, we really appreciate your time today and sharing some history of the EAA and your own career and some advice for everyone else here. And we wish you the best.
Well, thank you very much. This has been fun.
Yes. Cheers to your 26-year career here at the EAA.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna miss the place. As I told Roland in my a formal letter of retirement, I'm probably gonna miss everyone here and this place more than I know now.
I know, right? But the door's always open, Brock.
Yeah, and I don't live very far.
Yeah.
We know where you live.
Yeah.
We will get you to volunteer.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Recharge Zone podcast. Have questions, ideas for topics, or things you would like to share with us? Well, reach out to us at rechargezone@edwardsaquifer.org.